Friday edition of NBL Now, thanks to Code Sports. You can go behind all the news and get in-depth analysis at codesports.com.au. Joel Peterson alongside NBL MVP Chris Anstey on this Friday morning. Chris, good to see you, mate.
Good to see you, Joel, and it was nice to sit down on the couch last night and watch a couple of very interesting games. I don't get many nights off, so I really enjoyed it.
Weren't they just? Let's start with the first one, which was New Zealand and Brisbane. So a furious comeback from the Bullets. They were 22 down. They win at 84-83, thanks to the FIBA rules heads up from Tyrell Harrison, who knew you can tip it off the cylinder and tip it off the rim. 45-26, they outscored New Zealand in that second half. What on earth happened to the Breakers, or was that good from the Bullets?
It's always, it's always six of one, half a dozen of the other, isn't it? Look, Brisbane came back on the back of their talent. And you mentioned the game-winning tip off the rim by Tyrell Harrison. As a big, I loved seeing it in 2-in-1 possession. But look, Brisbane, Lamar Patterson, I think he's working his way into either keeping his contract with Brisbane or, in fact, finding a home somewhere else in the NBL if there's another change. I think Casey Prather, when New Zealand weren't going well, was the only guy who kept the scoreboard ticking over. And just their depth of talent. Jalen Adams, when he's got the ball in his hands, is as dangerous as there is in the league. Now, when he doesn't have the ball in his hands, that's a whole other thing. But one thing I guess I always look at in any game or in any season is when a team's doing well is the way they're doing it sustainable. And you look and you see Salmon, and he's got 25 points at halftime. And I enjoyed watching it. He was face up. He was back to the basket. He was shooting the three. But I wondered if it was sustainable. It turns out it wasn't. But New Zealand have some real questions to ask. And I think maybe the first one they need to ask is, and I think I know the answer, is Rob Baker the answer in one of the import spots? And clearly he's not. He's coming off the bench. He's playing limited minutes. I still think New Zealand can be competitive with Parker Jackson, Cartwright, and the core of New Zealand players they've got, but they need a second genuine import. And maybe it's Lamar Patterson if Brisbane make a move, but certainly Rob Baker, I think, may very well be the next import on an aeroplane home. But well done to Brisbane. They needed that win. There's been a lot said about them. They competed, and they got a very serviceable win on the road in New Zealand.
Of course, there's been some reports the last little while that Dakota Matthias Matthias has agreed to a deal with Brisbane, so potentially another import coming in. And yeah, teams could do worse than Lamar Patterson.
From New Zealand, I'm not letting him leave. I would make sure Lamar Patterson stays in New Zealand. I'd be sending Rob Baker on that aeroplane home and keeping Lamar Patterson.
Hopefully the Breakers know someone at Customs at Auckland Airport to try and get him out from leaving this morning. The late game was quality. That was a terrific game last night. So they go to the half 48-45, the Kings. It was a powerful second half performance from Southeast Melbourne to run over the top of them in the end. They shot the ball really, really well, and they got it from everywhere. Nathan Sobey had a 30-piece. Geordie Hunter hit a few threes. Hunter Maldonado came in and had his best game as well. What do you like from Southeast Melbourne with a performance like that?
First and foremost, there's an edge to them this year that I don't think they've had the last couple of years. There's that competitiveness and that grittiness that I really like. But the thing that stood out to me very, very early in the game was that Nathan Sobey came out and played with a lot of composure in a game that was really quick up and down the floor. A lot of early offense. Sobes seemed to have a rhythm. He didn't seem to be rushed, and there's a difference between playing fast and playing in a hurry. He played fast but still seemed under control. So I thought he was really impressive the entirety of the game. The Kings, on the other hand, looked a little bit rushed. A couple of quick shots, a couple of poor shots. They don't shoot the three-point shot very well at all, but I think the storyline has to come out of the Phoenix. I wasn't sure with their roster as to how they would be. I think their backcourt of Sobey and Foxwell, before you begin adding imports, is extraordinarily strong. Where's Awundu? I think will be absolutely fine. I chuckled and had a couple of messages go around. Another first game import fouls out, not really knowing how the game's officiated and not knowing how some of the veterans in our league, like Matthew Dellavedova, draw fouls. But look, he did enough to think that, or to allow me to think that he's going to be just fine. And the Phoenix were very good.
Is that where's your ceiling for them? If that's the best that they deliver, do they stack up against the best in the competition?
I think it's such an interesting question because you don't want to go on record as making a prediction this early in the season. I want to see how Awundu does. I want to see who Angus Glover really is. I think we all know how talented he can be, but to go from a week, I already mentioned, the sustainability of what you do. Angus has a 25-point, I believe, half last week, a quiet second half, but in a win, and then today only has 4 points. I think as a coach, you'd like to know going into any game pretty close to what you're going to get from most of your players and not sort of cross your fingers and wonder which version of a player is going to come out. So I think that's one of the issues we're seeing in the league with the quick rotations, the lower minutes. And Angus has been one of them. So I'm really excited to see how he settles into this season. I'd love to see him, as well as some of the other guys, continue to be more aggressive looking to score the ball because I think they're a good team when he's on the court. But their ceiling, I think they can compete with anyone, especially when they get settled. They're probably not quite where United and Adelaide are yet. And I'd probably think that Adelaide and United's ceiling remains a little bit higher. But you never really play to your ceilings in a playoff series. So look, they've put themselves in the mix.
And the Kings, so they've taken some big scalps. They beat Adelaide. They beat Perth. Their best is very good. Much like many of the teams in the competition at the moment, there's these sort of wild fluctuations between their best and some of their other performances. Are you concerned with what you saw from them or willing to sort of hold your cards at this stage?
I hold my cards a little bit. I respect Brian Gorgian and the coaching staff more than that, and I think they'll figure out a way to maximise the pieces they've got. They may find a way or they may decide to move a piece or two, but again, for Gorge and the coaching staff, I'm still not sure they know exactly what version of certain players they'll get every week. And you mentioned the inconsistency, and with a lot of teams, you look and say you're inconsistent because of the 3-point line and the volume of threes that a team shoots. And sometimes it depends quite literally if you make or miss your 3-point shot. Now, the Kings never have to worry about that. They don't shoot many and they don't shoot it well. So in one regard, they are consistent and we know what they're going to be, but they've got to be the best version of that. They've got to be on the rim. They've got to be powerful. They've got to defend like crazy. And I didn't think the defensive edge was there tonight. And that's probably one of the things that would concern their coaching staff as much as anything else.
Let's kick it into tonight's game, Cairns and Melbourne, up in Cairns. So they played on Wednesday up there. They've got a home doubleheader a couple of days in a row. And then Melbourne, of course, 7-0 coming in off a win against New Zealand on Sunday. And it's another point where Adam Ford is trying to sort of turn the season around for Cairns and find some leadership and I guess a bit of resolve in this team. Do you think they've got it in them to put a performance on tonight against United?
No. You can turn that team any way you want against Melbourne United. You'll still run into a brick wall or off a cliff. No, look, Melbourne are a class above what Cairns are. And look, Jack McVeigh's a game-time decision, I'm led to believe. But even with Jack coming back and not quite being 100% and not having the volume of work in his legs the last couple of weeks, they're going to be underdone. They can't score like United can. They're not as tight defensively. That'll be a comfortable win for United.
On McVeigh, so he's a game-time decision, but he's so important to them. But you have to balance that with, at this stage, the urgency that they're under to try and win. Would you, if you're Adam Ford's shoes, would you risk him?
No, I wouldn't, because you'd lose anyway. So I'd give him those extra couple of days, assuming that you're probably not going to get over the top of United anyway. Give him those extra couple of days, make sure he's cherry ripe for the game after.
Bryce Cotton got 53 up there the other day. Do you think Chris Goulding would be going up there sort of licking his lips? It can be, over history, it's been a notoriously tough place for a lot of shooters to go up and have success. But maybe CG's just needs to channel a little bit of Bryce.
He's scoring in bunches, isn't he? No, look, I don't think he will. And I only say that in no way, shape or form because of Chris Goulding. I just think United will be too far up. They'll go deep into their bench. I'd be amazed if Chris Goulding plays more than low 20s minutes. It's pretty hard to have 50 in 20 minutes. I'm sure he'll get his shots up. I know for a fact Melbourne are a better team with him in it. I've smiled as he's come back, and he's, like I said, he had a lot of points in very few minutes. I've enjoyed seeing him come back from injury, and I'll enjoy watching him score in bunches, but probably short bunches against the Taipans.
If anyone could get 50 in 20 minutes, I reckon it's Chris. I reckon it is Chris Golding. Sunday is the big game of the round. I'll get your thoughts on all the others, but Melbourne and Adelaide, and anytime a home team tries to sell tickets based on the guy that's coming into their building, there's things are going pretty well, and there's a bit of a draw card there, and that's what Melbourne have been doing, given that Bryce Cotton is coming into their venue on Sunday afternoon. It's game of the round. It's the top two teams. It's the teams that everyone feels maybe the most settled at this point of the season. How excited are you to see how Sunday unfolds?
Really interested. I tend not to get too excited too early in the season, but I'm fascinated by this one. I think we're going to learn a lot about both teams and how they handle top-level competition, and they probably haven't seen that yet. And you'd probably argue that Adelaide, over the duration of an entire game, haven't played up to their potential for an entire 40 minutes yet, but they're going to need to beat United. And I think what Adelaide will take from this game, and maybe it'll be enough to win, but you just can't take possessions off against Melbourne United. I think they're too deep, too disciplined, the ability to score, the ability to defend. And look, I heard Ricky Grace mention the United team might be the best team ever put on an NBL floor. I'm not prepared to go that far, but they're certainly one of the most balanced. They're certainly one of the deepest. And if you took the role of their 9th or 10th guy and matched that up historically, that'd probably go close in that regard. But probably the challenge United need. They've cruised so far. They've been reasonably comfortable. They need to get a little bit uncomfortable, be challenged, and find some answers to questions they don't know need answering just yet.
And what do you want to see from the Adelaide point of view? Like, what are they? Because again, they've been, their best has been brilliant. They coughed one up against Sydney in Adelaide, which was sort of a big marquee kind of game. What do you want to see from Adelaide as they come into Melbourne on Sunday?
Consistency of effort, I think, is the thing, and probably a reduction of emotion. I don't think you can depend on emotion or need emotion to get up against some of the better teams. I want to see how they utilise Bryce Cotton against the best team in the league at the moment. I want to see if they can defend or have a mindset to defend and to execute on the offensive end across the 40 minutes. Again, we've seen it in short spurts, and it's been enough because they are so talented to win. I think they're 5-1 to win their 5 games already, but I believe they're going to need to do it for the duration of the game to get over United. So I'm fascinated to see what that looks like.
Yeah, it's going to be all kinds of fun. My man Dash Daniels, the young man from Bendigo, of course, his brother signed a big contract this week. Do you think he gets the job? Do you think Dean Vickerman, who doesn't mind throwing a challenge at his younger players, do you reckon he sets him even for a few minutes for Bryce Cotton?
I'm sure you'll see him for a few minutes. I think the only way you can even begin to try to guard Bryce Cotton is through a number of players who, and Dyson has length. And one of the things, and it's an interesting one, is Bryce Cotton's on top of being extraordinarily talented, is exceptionally smart. And he knows what a lot of defenders do in this league and defenders he's come across. Now, what Dash Daniels is, he's 17 years old, and maybe Dash doesn't quite know what he's going to do yet. So how do you prepare for that if you're Bryce? It could just be an absolutely fascinating matchup of youth versus experience. I'd love to see it for a few minutes. I can imagine the NBA scouts would cut up all the footage of that happening, but we'll see it for a little while. But I think United will throw a lot of different looks of Bryce Cotton. What you see early in the game certainly won't be what you see later on in the game.
Yeah, they seem like they're sort of uniquely able to slow down someone like that. A little bit of late breaking news last night as well is that the Perth Wildcats are reportedly in advanced talks with David Duke Jr., who's most recently played with the San Antonio Spurs and the Austin Spurs in the G League. So scoring guard, 17 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists in terms of his most recent form. 6'4" guard coming in, so maybe a little bit smaller than Mason Jones. Is it a surprise that they've gone in that direction, Chris, from their new import, or is that essentially what they need? A bit more scoring punch in the backcourt and someone to try and sort of settle them down on the offensive end.
You're spot on. Exactly what you said. They certainly needed it to be in the backcourt, and I can only imagine that Matty Nielsen would have had a big say in this recruiting pitch as well. I'm sure they would have called him. I'm sure to have someone available to recruit a player who knows the NBL and knows if a player or if he believes a player will fit, I think is really important. So to come from that program and to have Matty Nielsen's feedback, I can only imagine that's happening. In fact, Brett Brown's, I think I would be very comfortable in assuming that he will succeed and help Perth become better again. They were very good against Cairns. We're not sure what that means yet, but they need more if they are going to compete. And as you mentioned before, I don't know what their ceiling is yet. They don't either. They need to add some pieces before we figure that out. And I think this is a really solid piece.
Yep, there'll be more on that at codesports.com.au. Mick Randall, Matt Logan, the crew will have all of that as it unfolds over the next couple of days. Before we hear a little bit more from Mick, just a bit of who wins and why, Chris, with the remaining games. So I take it you're having Melbourne over Adelaide on Sunday?
I'll take Melbourne over Adelaide, but only just. I just think depth and consistency across the entire game, but in a very close game.
Two teams that already played this round. So Brisbane coming off the New Zealand win. Southeast Melbourne travel up there to the Brisbane Entertainment Centre to take on the Bullets. So both teams on the road, essentially, even though it's Brisbane sleeping in their own beds. Who wins that?
I'll take the Phoenix. I think their tempo might be a little bit too quick for Jalen Adams, Casey Prather, Lamar Patterson. I think they might put a few too many points on the board for them and be able to limit their individual one-on-one scoring prowess up there.
Late game Saturday is Perth taking on Illawarra. Now, Illawarra have sort of had the answer for Bryce Cotton over a little stretch of time there. He's now no longer there as they go to Perth. Who have you got between the Cats and the Hawks?
You've got to say Perth, though. You and Illawarra, I'm sure it'll come up on an episode not too far from here, but defending champions with the marquee signing. I'm just not sure what they are yet, and however many highlights you see from JaVale McGee, you wonder if they translate to winning basketball, and they haven't yet. So until his highlights translate into winning basketball, I'll tip Perth.
And then Sydney Tassie to close out the round.
That's almost my game of the round. Take out Melbourne Adelaide has to be, doesn't it? But that's a really, really interesting one. Sydney coming off a loss is always tough. Tasmania, just since the minute they walked into the NBL and they've competed and they've been a hard out or a hard win. I'm going to tip Sydney only because I think their next couple of days is going to be very soul-searching. I reckon they'll come out with a strong strategy, and they, if anything, have a little bit too much size for Tasmania, and they might just beat them up inside a little bit, I think.
Yeah, it'll be an intriguing game, the late game on Sunday. So that's our game previews. Let's go to Mick Randall for the latest stories at codesports.com.au.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. Plenty going on in the NBL as usual. And the big blue at the end of the Perth and Cairns game, well, that's been referred to the NBL tribunal. So there'll be more to come on that, whether that's suspensions or fines, we don't know. Andrew Bogut last week stepped up when Gorge got tossed. It's got people thinking that, he's going pretty well as an assistant coach and he might be a future Boomers coach in waiting. Had a chat to a few players and some ex-Sydney Kings about what makes him so good. And there's some enlightening things in that. Up north, Brisbane's got a new import. They've replaced Javon Freeman-Liberty with Dakota Matthias, but might not be done yet. Jalen Adams on thin ice, must play well, must meet standards. They've already started inquiring about other imports up there, so there's plenty going on in Brisbane. United, perfect start, 7-0. Had a bit of a look into Dean Vickerman and, how he's built such a deep and ruthless roster. All that and more only at codesports.com.au.
And that's it for NBL Now on this Friday morning and for the week. Massive weekend of hoops coming up. Chris, always good to chop it up with you. Look forward to hopefully either whether you're sitting home at the couch or you're behind the bar at the pub, catching more NBL action across the course of the weekend. Always good to chat to you, mate.
I'll be watching. Have a great weekend.
Chris Anstey on NBL Now. Thanks for your company too. Plenty more to come. Remember, codesports.com.au for the stories behind the stories, what you don't see on game night, exclusive insights and analysis with codesports.com.au or, of course, on the app. More NBL Now next week. Enjoy your week of hoops.